Good evening, everyone. My name is Robin Gofine, and I'm the Executive Director of the National Council of Jewish Women of Canada, Toronto section. We're pleased to welcome you this evening to the second of a two-part series entitled Family Planning and Cancer. National Council of Jewish Women of Canada, Toronto section is a volunteer-based organization that enables women to spend their volunteer time doing meaningful projects that reflect needs in our community. And the L'chaim Cancer Support Program is one that we've been running for approximately 20 years. And it's one which has helped many, many women in the Jewish community who are requiring support, information, and connections during their cancer journey. We made the decision this year, largely in response to two of our participants, Lauren Newman and Liette Gorelick, who will be speaking this evening, to reach out to a younger audience and try to engage younger women who are touched by cancer and are requiring support as part of our next steps to grow the L'chaim Cancer Support Program. So I would like this evening to thank everyone who's participating, those of you who are here as guests, and in particular, thank you to our guest presenters, Lauren Newman, Sheila Neuberger, Dr. Ariel Bloch-Froelich, and Liette Gorelick. The format for this evening's program will be 4 15-minute presentations focusing on different aspects of the, I would say, psychosocial aspects of individuals who are faced with cancer. We'll be hearing firsthand accounts of surrogacy. We'll be hearing information from Sheila Neuberger about the adoption process in Ontario. Dr. Ariel Bloch-Froelich will be presenting on mental health aspects of infertility and cancer, and Liette Gorelick will be providing us with a personal perspective and a perspective on finding spiritual strength during a cancer journey. I will introduce each speaker separately, and I will also keep time. So when the time allotted for the presentation is complete, I will provide that information to the speaker. And as I said, each speaker will speak for up to 15 minutes. And then at the end of each of the presentations at 8:30, there'll be an opportunity for participants, audience members to ask any questions that they may have to any of the presenters. So our first speaker this evening is Lauren Newman. Lauren is a film set photographer, a cervical cancer survivor, and a mother to the adorable Alon. She looks forward to sharing her experience with you on a less than conventional journey to motherhood post-diagnosis. And just as a side note, I met Lauren because she is a relative newcomer to the city of Toronto and was looking for connections and places where she could make a difference. And so we met and connected, and this was one area where Lauren felt that she might be able to be helpful to others. So we hope that you find the conversation interesting. What I'm going to do is I'm going to be interviewing Lauren for this portion of the program. Hi, Lauren. Welcome, and thank you for joining us this evening. So I thought we could start by having you tell us about yourself, where you're from, how long you've lived in Toronto.
So my name is Lauren Newman. As Robin mentions, I am a photographer at the moment working in the film and also wedding industry. I moved to Toronto about 6 years ago with my husband, who's Israeli. We moved from Israel. I was born in London to an Algerian mother and an English-Irish father. And yeah, that's pretty much me at the moment.
So you yourself have had an experience with cancer as a young woman. Could you tell us a little bit about that experience and how that affected your ability to have children?
Yeah. So at the time I was living in Israel, I was 28 years old and I was going for a routine gynecologist checkup. The pap smear came back with abnormal results, and that led to us finding out that I had an aggressive form of cervical cancer. So within, I think, about a month and a half, I was booked in for a radical hysterectomy, which means that my cervix and womb would be taken out so I could survive. Luckily, I was very fortunate that it hadn't spread, so I didn't need radio chemotherapy. But obviously the procedure had effects for me in the future, which meant I wouldn't be able to bear my own child or bring my child to term to carry my child. So that presented the whole world of surrogacy ahead of us if we chose to go down that route. And I think from an early stage, we decided that we wanted to have a biological child. So we wanted to try and pursue gestational surrogacy.
And can you talk a little bit about gestational surrogacy and what that meant for you at the time?
Yes, so gestational surrogacy, I think in most countries at the moment, this is actually the way it's done now. Before, there would be cases where there would be sperm donation, and then the surrogate would also be the contributor. So it would be perhaps her egg. So in our case, because I still have functioning ovaries, we took from my husband and I and created an embryo. And from there, we needed basically a surrogate to hold our child to term. So that's a gestational surrogate.
And tell us about the journey, sort of from the moment that you decided that you wanted to pursue surrogacy as an option through to the birth of Alon.
Definitely. So it was, I think it might divert a little bit. As you said, it's an unusual story going through cervical cancer and then choosing to have a gestational surrogacy, because you're obviously dealing with the trauma of having survived cancer. So there was a big period that we left it. We knew we did want to have children, but it was such a devastating time in my life and my husband and our family that we wanted to leave it for a bit. So only once we arrived in Canada did we start exploring gestational surrogacy and what that entailed. So about 4 years ago, we started our research, and I think the first chunks of research and knowing what steps to do was to find a fertility clinic. So they would deal obviously with the creation of the embryos, then they would deal with implanting, I'm not sure that that's the correct, but going with the gestational surrogate that we've chosen. And then there's also 2 options in that area. The gestational surrogate can be somebody that you find independently, or you can find through a surrogacy agency who basically bridge that gap between you both and suggest gestational surrogates that they have. So women that are wanting and willing to carry others' babies to term. And obviously then there's lawyers and all of the other different areas that you have to connect together to create the beginning of that journey.
And what was the process like for you on an emotional level as you were going through it?
I say this often, and it might be a bit dark, but I feel that going through gestational surrogacy or going through our surrogacy journey in a lot of aspects was a lot more difficult than being diagnosed with cancer and going through cancer. My cancer, as terrible as it was and traumatic as it was very short-lived in terms of the direct result of like having my operation and the recuperation afterwards. And I feel with the surrogacy and with that entire journey, it to this day, so it took about 4 years for us to get where we were at. And a big part of that is understanding the system, because I feel that there's sometimes a disconnect between cervical cancer survivors and then the pursuit of surrogacy, because they're different entities. One is more hospitals, medical field, and the other, while that is the same, can be, I guess, more of an independent realm or world. And kind of educating ourselves on that was a lot of emotions. Obviously there's big financial aspect to it, and emotionally I think also, because when you're trying to conceive a child in that sense, you have obviously your family and your friends that are concerned, and they're excited and they want to know like what's happening, are you guys pregnant yet? And to try and explain to them the world that you're in, yeah, it's very tough.
And can you talk a little bit, if you don't mind, about your husband's experience? I know I don't want to put you in a position to speak for him, but just give a sense of while you were going through this, what it was like for him.
So Asaf is a godsend. I'm so grateful to have had a partner like this. I feel because it's such a difficult journey, even if it goes technically smoothly all the way, having a partner to be somebody you can rely on and a shoulder to cry on at times. And he was amazing, and he was always communication was very important for us both, and being a team, and I never felt like I was alone throughout the process. So I'm forever grateful to how he was such a great partner to me, and now how he's such a wonderful parent. I like to always say he was born to be a dad, and Robin can experience that on a personal level because we've spent time together, and seeing Asaf with our son Alon, you can really see it's it's something very beautiful. So very, very grateful.
Can you tell us a little bit about as you were going through the pregnancy of through the surrogate, what would have been helpful to you as individuals and as a couple from the friends and loved ones around you? If you were to give advice to those around you or someone who's chosen to choose this path, what advice would you give to allow people to be helpful and supportive in the circumstance?
Oh, I think information is key. Like getting as much information as you can and kind of gathering that, talking to as many people from that world as you possibly can. When it comes to family and friends, I think that plays hand in hand with being a cancer survivor or going through cancer also, because a lot of times our loved ones don't really know what to do and what to say, but they want to be there desperately for us. And I think that's exactly what they should do. They should be there for us, just be normal as such, be supportive. And if the conversation opens up to speak about the surrogacy journey or what we're going through and they feel that, then great. But if to not pressure and put that pressure on them, because there's other pressures that they're dealing with as a couple. So yeah, I would say just be there for them as a regular family member.
Would you have preferred, and I'm asking you this because I actually happen to know somebody who's also going through a similar situation for the same reason. Would you have preferred that people ask, or would you have preferred that people don't ask and wait for you to say something?
Oh, it's a tough one, right? It's a tough one because there are times where I do wish that people would have not been afraid and would have asked us questions, specifically our friends, because our family, let's be honest, they were asking no matter what. They had all the questions, parents, like they wanted to know.
Yes.
But friends, yeah, I definitely wish that they had asked, but at the same time, in an environment which they had a feeling that it was comfortable and safe enough to bring up that discussion. So obviously not like in a bar somewhere or around loads of people that you're not necessarily close to, but yeah, feeling thought of and cared by is very important. And I think sometimes people checking in on you, and that's the thing, you can just initially check in on those couples that are going through it. And from there you can gather whether they want to continue that conversation or not. So giving them that choice.
That's helpful. Okay, I have a couple more questions before we close this part. Tell us what your greatest challenge along the journey was and what your greatest victory was, or the high point of the experience. And maybe tell us a little bit about what maybe we can close by my asking you to tell us what it was like when you finally met your son, and tell us a little bit about Alon now, just to end on a very beautiful and positive note.
Okay. I would say the biggest lesson that I think both Asaf and I took, because we're very detail oriented, we love information, we love to understand and be in control of like what's going on. For us, the biggest thing was the releasing of power or knowing what's coming next, like to understand that some things are beyond our control. And wow, the surrogacy journey is 100% beyond your control. I mean, obviously there's choices you can make about which gestational surrogate you pick, which fertility clinic you go to, but ultimately you have to release. There's so many other people involved in this process that you have to kind of release that control. And for somebody that's a bit OCD, it was not
Difficult.
for us. And wow, I mean, the highlight was Alon. Spending 4 years of ups and downs and the emotional torment of it all at times, honestly, like seeing his face the day he was born and being able to hold him, and he's just, yeah, he's joy in life, and he's such a wonderful baby. And Asaf jokes that because we went through so much, the world has given us like a beautiful, kind, lovely baby. Like, he goes to sleep at 7 o'clock at night and he sleeps until like 5:36 in the morning. He eats well, he's chunky, he's always smiling and laughing at everybody he meets. So yeah, we're very happy in that sense. It was all worth it in the end.
Okay, well, we'll close with that. And I just want to say thank you to you for two things. First of all, for being so open and generous with sharing a very intimate experience with people you don't know. And I do want to say to the people who are watching that this program is largely inspired by Lauren's desire to support her peers or women younger than her who've gone through the same thing. And what we're really hoping to do, which you'll hear about afterwards, is to reach out and try to build a group or a cohort of young women in our community who can continue to meet and grow. And so Lauren's sharing of her story is really an expression of that desire to help other women in similar situations and to provide that support and friendship. So on behalf of all of us, Lauren, I want to say thank you.
Thank you. And I'd like to say thank you so much to Robin, who has been nothing but wonderful since the moment I met her, and the L'chaim group and all the women that are involved in this amazing community and initiative. Honestly, this would have been something so important to me when I was going through it. So I'm so grateful that you are doing this and you're presenting this information and giving this community to women that are going through it, because it can sometimes be quite lonely and daunting. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Lauren. Okay, so we're going to move to our next speaker, Sheila Neuberger. Sheila is an adoption practitioner in private practice. She's trained as a social worker and has a long career as a healthcare executive. In addition to her professional work, Sheila serves on many important not-for-profit boards in the GTA and also happens to serve as the president of the National Council of Jewish Women of Canada, Toronto section. Her presentation this evening is in her capacity as an adoption practitioner. And when she heard about her program and she heard that we were looking for somebody to provide a perspective on adoption, we were very fortunate that she brings expertise to this field. And in this way, I will turn the floor over to Sheila. Sheila, you're on mute.
Thanks so much, Robin, and thanks to all of our participants. Robin is right. I am an adoption practitioner, and I've had a license or an approval for many, many years, over 30 years, to conduct home studies and post-placement services for adoptive applicants. So I do come to this 15 minutes with a fair bit of experience. I have always done this on a part-time basis, and on a full-time basis was a healthcare executive. And I kept this practice going over the years because it is extremely rewarding. It can be difficult and it can be frustrating for the adoptive applicants, but at the end of the day, it is often very rewarding. So if you could just move the slide for me, Mark, thank you. So adoption's been around a lot longer than many of the technologies that are available today. And when I started practicing 150 years ago, if a couple wasn't able, or a single person able to have their own biological child, they only really had one choice or two choices, to remain childless or to adopt. And thankfully, over the years, this has definitely changed, and Lauren's story is testament to that. There are many sort of reproductive options. There's surrogacy, there's embryo donation, and there's adoption. And I always want my clients to really know what all of their options are or what is possible for them. But of course, right now I'm going to focus on adoption because that's where my interest and my experience lie. But at the same time, in the world that we live in now, it is important to know that it is but one option. Now, adoption is controlled or regulated in Ontario through the Ministry of Children and Family and Social Services, and it is highly regulated. So everyone that's involved in adoption, and it's not unlike surrogacy when Lauren said there were so many people that she had to give up control. Adoption is somewhat similar to that as well. There's your adoption practitioner, there's an adoption agency. You may be involved with a lawyer who has a license to work in the field of adoption. All of these players have to be relicensed every year by the ministry on an annual basis. In fact, I just got my license for the coming year today. And in order to get it, a few trees have to die. You have to demonstrate that you have knowledge in the field, that you've been doing education, and that you've actually done some work in the field in the last year. So I tell you this so that people sometimes wonder, do people know what they're doing? Is there opportunity for scam? If you go to the people that are licensed by the Ministry of Children, Family and Social Services, you're in safe hands from that perspective anyway. Now, if you want to adopt in Ontario, you must have what's called a safe home study, and you must take a training course. These are kind of bureaucratic processes. A safe home study, and that's what the part that I do. It's called structured analysis for family evaluation, and it's a templated assessment. And then you must also take a 27-hour course. I won't even. It's parents. It's an education course, basically. I won't think about what the acronym is right now. And so if you want to adopt either domestically, through children, privately, or internationally, you still have to go through that process. And you, if once you do, you're considered adopt ready, and then you can kind of take the next steps towards adoption. Next slide. So basically, when I do consults for clients, and I do lots of consultations for people that then make other choices, but anything related to fertility and reproductive choices, I would say that knowledge is power. And so the more information that you can gain, accurate information, the better positioned you are to make what is the best choice for you or for you and your partner. So when I do a consultation, I basically say that there's 3 buckets for adoption. One is public adoption, otherwise known as Children's Aid Adoption / Jewish Family and Child Services / Catholic Children's Aid, public adoption. Having said that, all of the public agencies, the public child welfare agencies, in the last 5 to 10 years have become extremely focused on keeping children within their biological family unit. They are not particularly focused on voluntary adoptions anymore. They don't have the resources. And for the children that come into their care, they want to reunite them with their biological family, whether that's a parent, whether it's a grandparent, an aunt, whatever. So adopting from Children's Aid is not easy, but it's not impossible either, which I think is a statement that applies to all of adoption, actually. But generally, if you're going to look at adopting publicly, you have to be prepared to adopt a child over 5 years of age. And again, I'm generalizing. There's always going to be a story of a couple that went to Children's Aid and somehow they got matched with a 1-year-old or an 18-month. So I'm telling you the theoretical story on the street is they generally will not take anybody that will not adopt a child over 5 years of age. And most of the children that come into their care will have special needs related to trauma, neglect, and the multiple transitions they may have had from their biological family to foster homes, back to their biological family, and so on. So adopting from Children's Aid is not for the faint-hearted by any stretch of the imagination, but over the years, I have done numbers of home studies for people where they wanted to have their home study done at a quicker speed than you can get from Children's Aid, and then they've taken it to Children's Aid and they have adopted. But it's, you know, I have to say that I have more clients who have not adopted from Children's Aid than have, but everybody needs to know it's an option. Next slide, please. I don't have control of the slides. So the next option is one that often appeals to couples that have been through a fertility journey that for whatever reason don't want to go down the route that Lauren went down and are comfortable with the concept of adoption. So that brings us to private adoption, or sometimes called domestic adoption. And it can be accomplished through private adoption agencies or a lawyer licensee. So there are two or three agencies in the province that are licensed to keep waiting lists of adoptive applicants. And then when birth parents come to them, and they will find them in a variety of ways, often nowadays on social media, and they come to them to make an elective adoption plan for their child. So these birth parents have made a conscious decision that they cannot parent and they want to relinquish their child. Generally, they would come to the adoption agency, and again, I'm generalizing, but typically it's 7 months pregnant, 8 months pregnant, and they start making a plan. They then, you know, say they would like this in a couple, they'd like that, they want a specific religion, they may want an age boundary, they don't want anybody over 45, they want somebody that lives in the country, they want somebody that lives in the city, whatever is important to them, and then the adoption agency will find 5 couples that meet the birth parents' criteria, present the profiles that the couples have created. Oh, I only have 4 minutes, and they will pick. And if you're the one picked, you move forward with the adoption plan. There's a lot of legal processes involved in the entire process, a lot of legality, but if it all works out, and it is very much what Lauren said, you know, about many legal processes, many people involved, but if it works out, at the end of the day, you've adopted a newborn. Next slide, very quickly. International adoption. Really, I could speak all night about international adoption. Many of the home studies I do are for people that are going to adopt internationally. There are fewer countries open to Canada since the Hague Convention came in place about 7 or 8 years ago. At the moment, the most popular countries are India, the United States, South Africa, and Bulgaria. The timelines can vary, but generally people will adopt in 3 to 4 years. So sort of similar to surrogacy, and the cost can vary from country to country. So again, except for Children's Aid, the clients are paying for all facets of their adoption, from the consult to the home study and the adoption agency. Next slide. If you're interested in adoption, or you think you might be, a couple of things you can do. There's something called Adopt Ontario. They have an excellent website. You can go on and get the information from there. You can arrange a tailored consultation with an adoption practitioner. Often it's a good idea to speak to a few people, see who you like, who you feel like there's a good fit with. And then you do the consultation. I often suggest to people, even though I do the home studies, not the Pride education, I suggest to people take the education first. Don't invest stick your toe in the water and then stick your foot and keep on going if you're comfortable. Don't sort of do a whole bunch of things at once. And again, in my waning moments in these 15 minutes, I always say, both parties have to be comfortable with it. If one person is pushing the other towards adoption, it just doesn't work and can cause a lot of difficulties during a time that's often very fragile for couples. So often the consultation, the course, it kind of either you feel jazzed by it and you want to continue, or you go, yuck, this isn't for me. I want to look at another option, be it a biological, etc. So, and the other thing is you can pursue a private domestic adoption and international adoption at the same time. It's somewhat complex. So originally I had my email on the slide, but it didn't kind of come in. So I'm going to put it in the chat. And there's sort of no way during this time. Adoption is a very textured, very layered kind of topic, and there's no way I can do it justice in the 1 minute that I have left. So I'm going to put my email in the chat. If anybody has any questions, by all means, feel free to email me, or I guess there'll be a little bit of time at the end of the talk. Thank you. Did I do it, Robin?
You did a
Barely.
great job.
Okay.
Thank you. So
I'm going to put my email to everybody in the chat. So
thank you. And I want to thank you, Sheila, for lending your expertise to this group and this program. You presented a really excellent overview of the process in Ontario, and I learned a lot and really appreciate your time, as well as your commitment to this organization and the incredible work that you do. Thank you. Our next speaker is Dr. Ariel Bush-Froelich. Dr. Ariel is a clinical psychologist specializing in work with adults. She has a particular interest in working with couples and individuals facing infertility, family planning, and parenting. I want to welcome Dr. Ariel to our program and thank you for the considerable amount of time and thought that you've put into this really excellent presentation. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you, Robin. And I just wanted to say thank you, like a quick thank you to Sheila for your talk. And Lauren, that was such a beautiful story. I really appreciate hearing about that. So I am a psychologist and I'm going to present on fertility, cancer, and mental health. Let me just see here. So just a little bit about me. So I completed a doctorate in clinical psychology from the Université du Québec à Montréal, so in Montreal. I did my clinical training at the Sex and Couples Therapy Service at the Allen Institute in Montreal, and I did additional training on perinatal mood disorders at Postpartum Support International. And in my practice, I use an emotionally focused therapy lens for couples and for individuals, as well as acceptance and commitment therapy. So just in terms of my own personal journey, I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer at the time that me and my husband were trying to conceive. So that came hand in hand. And then at the same time, I also had pre-existing fertility issues as well. So I actually sought treatment for myself at a fertility clinic. I was very lucky. I have 2 beautiful boys, so I'm very happy about that. But at the time, what I found that was super lacking was the fact that there were barely any mental health professionals who were really specialized in the area. And so I took a special interest in terms of that's when I completed the additional training on perinatal mood disorders. And I take a special look at that in my practice. So I do practice with individuals and with couples who are facing fertility treatments, who are facing cancer, and who are just interested in terms of family planning.
Ariel, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but your slides aren't showing properly. Can you just put them, I think if you click on present full screen, you'll probably get to where you need to.
I seem to be full screen on my end. That's why I'm a little not sure how to do that.
I'm sorry, everyone. I'm just going to ask Mark if he has any advice here to help us, because they're fantastic
sharing.
slides.
I think you're not sharing your screen. You are only sharing your browser. So share your whole desktop and then launch that presentation.
Okay. So hold on.
Thank you.
There we go. Is that better?
Okay.
Yes, that looks great now.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, so first let's talk about a little bit about the research and to understand the link between cancer and fertility and why it's important. So young female cancer survivors face a higher risk to their fertility due to previous gynotoxic treatments, making fertility assessment and counseling crucial. The concerns extend beyond conceiving with their own eggs to the long-term impact on their health, particularly ovarian function. Research shows that women who desired children before treatment often maintain this desire post-diagnosis, with unfulfilled desires linked to poorer mental health. And post-cancer follow-up care should include regular fertility assessments and counseling for these women after treatment completion. We can also see that psychological distress is related to fertility and cancer. So psychological distress related to fertility is common and it's enduring in cancer patients and in survivors. Incorporating fertility-related psychological support from diagnosis to survivorship can greatly benefit the patients and the survivors. And 2 factors linked to fertility were pinpointed. So anxiety about potential infertility and external pressure to have children. And finally, they found a significant link between sexual dysfunction, fertility, and cancer. So cancer treatment could potentially affect quality of life, sexual function, and fertility. Female cancer survivors who underwent fertility preservation showed a significant prevalence of sexual dysfunction. So it's crucial to evaluate and discuss sexual function during fertility preservation consultations and follow-up appointments. So now I just want to talk about the mental health factors from cancer and fertility that I see in clinic. Now, I want to just make a note that this is not an exhaustive list. I think that there's a lot of different factors that would come in. Not everyone experiences the same thing, right? So I think that's really important for everybody to note that, you might experience it one way, someone might experience it a different way, but these are common factors that come up in therapy. So first of all is the psychological distress. So there's anxiety, there's depression, there's talk about the trauma, right? So fear of death from cancer, but also fear of the unknown, fear of what if I never have a baby? What if this never happens? There's a lack of control, right? There's a lack of control in terms of the treatment, in terms that, sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't work. We don't have control of our bodies or of the treatment process. There's also physical and emotional pain that are associated with either the assessments in fertility diagnosis, that diagnosis period, in the cancer treatments or in the fertility treatments. Again, everybody experiences so differently that what might be painful for one person has no pain for somebody else, but something else differently might experience pain, right? And so that physical and emotional pain can cause psychological distress as well. And then there's also loss and grief. So I often talk about, the fertility journey as a roller coaster, right? Because you're going up in emotion, you're hopeful, you're excited, you're thinking about the future, you're planning. And then there's periods of waiting where you're just sitting there and you have nothing to do and you can't figure it out. You don't know what's going to happen next. You don't know what happened before. You don't know what's going to happen afterwards, right? And then there could be periods of loss and grief in terms of losing a pregnancy or losing the hope of having a child, in terms of just all kinds of things coming up, including the cancer. The next kind of factor that I'm talking about is feeling broken, right? So a lot of individuals who go through cancer treatment report feeling broken. They report feeling like a failure, like they have shame. They also have body image issues because a lot of the treatments can cause scarring. It can cause weight loss or weight gain. They don't feel like themselves. They don't feel like they're in the same body that they were before. So that could be something that is also really hard to endure. And also it takes a toll on your self-esteem, on your confidence, on your sexuality, on everything else, right? And the same with hormones. So your hormones could be in flux because of the cancer treatments, but also because of the fertility treatments. You might be going through menopause, or you might be going on a roller coaster again of hormones in terms of what they're injecting during the cycle, during egg retrieval, etc. So with that, your emotions might be on a roller coaster again, right? Things like desire, things like, sexual desire, things like appetite, things like all those kinds of things are all related to hormones. So by your hormones being in flux, that's affecting everything else. Then we often talk about stigma. It's so unfortunate that so many people still to this day talk about these fertility treatments as being not natural. And I personally hate using that word natural because I think it's absolutely beautiful. No matter how you are trying to conceive a child or adopt a child, that is the most beautiful part. And so to say that this is not natural, or for people to say, to condemn it, or to, have this feeling of, should I do it? Right? Because then they start to question, do I even want this child? Do I want it this badly? Right? Am I going to do something that's against maybe my religious beliefs, or maybe against my cultural beliefs of this is not how it should happen, right? So all these kind of trickle down. The same with the it's not normal. And in fact, the studies have shown that between 44 to 86% of cancer survivors face reproductive issues, right? So it's not normal, right? And actually, even in the general population, there is a much higher prevalence these days of having fertility issues. So again, we need to talk about, how do we talk about this, right? So that people don't feel so alone. And also how it impacts your identity. So again, this feeling broken or feeling like it's not, like you're doing something that's not natural, how does that impact your identity? And finally, all of these can lead to feeling alone, right? So feeling isolated, feeling like there's a veil of secrecy around the fact that you're actually pursuing the fertility treatments, or even about the cancer. Because unfortunately in our society, we feel like we can't actually talk about this, right? And so that's really difficult too, in terms of, your work might know about it because you're taking off days for your appointments, and yet nobody's asking you about it, nobody's talking about it, so you don't feel like you're getting the support that you need. And then there's social media. So, social media can go either way these days in terms of, sometimes it's good in terms of there is a lot more talk right now on social media about how normal this is and about people who are sharing their stories. But at the same time, it could be triggering in terms of there's a lot of information out there and you might get information overload or information that you just don't want to get. And so how it may impact the couple. So in terms of the couple itself, there could be disconnection, right? So there's a lack of understanding or a lack of empathy. And again, I want to note that this is not for all couples. It could affect the couple in this way. And I also want to say that this is for heterosexual couples and LGBTQ plus couples as well. There could be a lack of understanding and empathy. There could be a lack of support. There could be miscommunication. There could be conflicting reactions, right? Someone might be super anxious. Someone else might be angry, right? Or might be really, really sad and depressed. And how do you match that? In terms of sexual intimacy, there could be a lack of sexual intimacy, right? In terms of the sexual dysfunction from the cancer, or even pre-existing, or even from the fertility treatments, in terms of baby making can put a lot of pressure on the couple, and you can suddenly get erection difficulties, or you can get low libido for women or for men, low desire, etc. So how do you differentiate baby making from love making? In terms of the couple making difficult decisions. So there's a lot of decision making that has to come in here into play in terms of the family planning. There's financial costs of fertility treatments that could affect the couple in terms of that's a source of stress. it's a source of, well, do we continue? Do we not continue? Do we try another cycle? Do we not get another cycle? Is it funded? Is it not funded? And then if that doesn't work, do we go to egg or sperm donation, or do we go to surrogacy, or do we go to adoption? And all of these are really tough decisions to be making. And then there could be concurrent other couple issues, right? There could be infidelity, there could be family dynamics at play, etc. So I just want to talk a little bit, and I know that we don't have too much time, but I do want to take a few minutes to talk about what we actually do in therapy, because I think a lot of people don't know what therapy entails, and that's scary, right? So the very first thing is establishing a safe space. It's establishing a safe space where you get support, where you get empathy, validation, understanding. Then we're going to be managing stress and your emotions. So we're going to be talking about the mind-body connection, making sure that your physical needs are met. So like eating, sleep, all of those are so important to maintain while this is going on. But then we're also going to be talking about your emotional regulation, right? So how do you play the waiting game while you're waiting to know, are you pregnant? Are you not pregnant, right? There's a lot of anxiety that goes into it. There's a lot of stress. There could be anger, there could be sadness, loss, grief. So we'll talk about relaxation techniques, focusing on what you can control, and taking breaks as needed. So for example, one of my clients, we talk about, okay, how many cycles can you do at once, right? Can you go 2 in a row? Great. And then what do you do in between? Do you take a vacation, right? Do you do some self-care? The other really important piece is advocacy. So what I like to do with my clients is preparing them for their appointments. So that's why it's so important to have a therapist who's knowledgeable in all the fertility process and cancer as well, in terms of treatments, in terms of what to expect, in terms of knowing the details, knowing the doctors, knowing etc., so that we can prepare the clients for all of this, right? So asking questions about the treatment plan and the process. How do you ask your doctor what's happening next? Well, how do you do it in a succinct way that your doctor is going to pay attention during your visit? And also, how do you process the information that you were just given while you're going to come to a treatment session? And that's where we're going to process all the information you were given. We're also going to talk about navigating social relationships, right? So determining the support system that you have, and how do you establish a better support system for yourself? Who do you trust with this information? Who can you tell that you're going through all this? And who do you know are going to be supportive and not maybe too invasive, that kind of thing. We also want to talk about how you engage with your friends who may or may not be having babies at the same time, right? Because it's really hard to carry 2 emotions at once. The happiness for that person because you know how much they want it, or don't, right? It depends. But also the sadness about the fact that it's not your turn yet, right? So that could be really difficult. And finally, how to seek out appropriate resources. So I love to work with pelvic floor physiotherapists. So I constantly refer my clients out to that so that they can be doing the physical aspect of, for example, sexuality, in terms of making sure that their pelvic floor, is strong enough, that they're not experiencing pain. And then we're talking about that in session. Dietitians as well, in terms of nutrition, accounts for a lot in terms of, let's say, PCOS or other issues for fertility. That's so helpful to have a dietitian on board. Then there could be acupuncture, safe exercise programs, and finally, social media accounts. So I do help to navigate which ones are safe, right? And which ones are too triggering for clients. And finally, in treatment with the couple. So how do you reestablish the emotional connection? How do you create empathy, understanding for each other? How do you become a team together, right? How do you reestablish trust if trust was missing before, or if they let you down in the past? And how do you identify each of your love languages, right? So that you can actually create that emotional connection and that emotional intimacy, even when the sexual intimacy is lacking. And so again, I do sex therapy as well to help couples out who are dealing with sexual dysfunctions like performance anxieties. Now suddenly it's go time and there's a lot of pressure to make a baby, right? So that could be affecting erections, or there could be decreased libido. There might be pain in terms of all the treatments that they've undergone for cancer might have caused vaginal pain. And so we differentiate baby making from love making. And how do you have sex for joy, for pleasure? How do we focus on pleasure? How do we reinvent that sexual script? And how do we expand the repertoire past just penetration? And finally, discussion of goals and making difficult decisions together. So how do we increase the couple's communication strategies so that they can confide in one another and have these conversations in a way that it doesn't escalate and get too full of emotion? How do you process their journey together, right? In terms of processing everything that's happened so far and what's going to keep happening. And how do you help them navigate the medical system, making difficult decisions, including how do you redefine the goals, right? So, if something's not working, how do you say, when is it time to stop? When is it time to consider a different option in alignment with their values? So thank you so much. And if you want to work together, this is how you can contact me as well. So thank you.
Dr. Ariel, thank you for that really outstanding presentation. I think that your clients are very fortunate to have somebody with such a depth of interest and expertise and personal experience to provide the empathy and understanding that people need during this, what can be difficult and also joyful journey. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise with all of us this evening. And we're going to move now to our last speaker, Liat Garelick, who, along with Lauren Newman, has been an inspiration in shaping this program. And Liat, I want to thank you for the time that you've spent in helping us think through how we can help, how we collectively can support and help women who face the challenges that we're talking about tonight. I'll just provide a brief introduction. Liat is a Jewish educator who's been involved in Jewish education and Jewish outreach for many years. She is the mother of many children and has an important story to tell. So with that, I will turn the evening over to Liat Garelick. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. Can you hear me properly?
Yes, we can.
I want to thank you guys. I want to thank Robin for really spearheading this and being a major force behind this, and for Lauren for her bravery, and Sheila for all your expertise, and Ariel, hey, how are you? So nice to see you. We go way back, and I didn't even know you had all these expertise. And thank you, Mark. You're so helpful. But I just want to point out that this is just a group of people who are very much dedicated to bettering the lives of the people around them, and it's a big honor to be amongst you all. So I was asked to speak. I want to tell you a little bit about my personal journey, and like Robin said, I'm gonna try to focus in specifically on the spiritual, quote unquote, nature of what got me through. So my personal journey started just over 2 years ago, when I was 7 months pregnant with my 7th baby. And I discovered lumps. Oh, I actually see Dr. Warner on the screen. I don't see her. I see her name. And she's going to be featured big time in this story because my OB at the time referred me right away to Dr. Warner, who right away told me that I had breast cancer. And so having discovered it while I was 7 months pregnant was interesting because firstly, I didn't know this, and I think most people don't know this, but I actually was able to have treatment while I was still pregnant. And so I actually had my first 2 rounds of chemo while he was still inside, which in itself is a trip. It's totally crazy experience. But I was extremely, extremely grateful to have found myself in a time in history where we know that this is a safe procedure. And really, thank God, he was born totally fine. He was born with more hair than I had. It turns out that chemo actually doesn't cross the placenta at that stage. Obviously, everybody has to discuss with their own personal doctors at what stage they're at. But at the stage that I was at and the kind of chemo I was going through, it was safe. And so I, thank God, gave birth to a healthy baby, and Dr. Warner had no mercy on me, and I was back to chemo the next day. No mercy. And so it was, there you are, tell them the truth, you had no mercy.
No mercy ever.
And so Dr. Warner really, with her no mercy, saved my life. And I really went for 6 months worth of chemo, and then a massive surgery, and then radiation. And so through that whole journey, happens to be that a lot of the fertility options that were available or are available to people through this journey weren't available to me because I was pregnant. And so can't extract eggs while you're pregnant. It's something, again, I had no clue. But I definitely, it was one of the things that I definitely explored, was the possibility of being able to have more. And it was one shut door at the chemo stage. And then there was the next stage, which was the surgery stage, and the surgery stage where the kind of surgery I chose really completely closed the door on being able to have any more kids. And so that was really, I honestly say, when I look back at it's funny, not funny, but when Lauren, describes the surrogacy journey as being more difficult than the cancer journey in some ways, I relate on a certain level to that idea that, the cancer is one thing, and you hope and pray that you'll be done with it when it's done. But the idea that this is going to last forever, and that this the mark of it is going to have a forever impact, is I think that was a hard pill to swallow. It was a very, very big pill to swallow, to think that that was it. I think there are a lot of things that come with that. Just the end of the line is just this, it's whether you have one or whether you have seven is and being forced into the end of the line, I think, is in itself is a difficult thing whenever you're confronted with that. And so obviously today, as Lauren and Sheila spoke about, there are so many other options available to people. But I want to speak about, in terms of the spiritual, quote unquote, nature of what got me through. I want to say two things. I think we often think of spiritual as something, airy-fairy up in the sky. But I think some of the most spiritual moments of my journey were the moments when, as everybody touched on, that I got to connect very deeply with myself and with others, and obviously with God. But the ability to really see beyond my personal experience, and for people to see beyond their experience and to see me through whatever they were going through, was, I think, in itself a very, very deeply spiritual experience. The ability, as everybody said, when Robin asked Lauren about how you could be supportive to people going through this, I think part of the skill is being able to see beyond how you feel in that moment and see the person in front of you, and to ask yourself, what does this person in front of me really need right now? Which is incredibly difficult skill, first of all, to build at all times, and especially when the emotions are so high for everybody. As somebody that was going through a ton of emotion, to be able to see my children and what they were going through, and to be able to see my husband and what he was going through, and see my parents and what they were going through, and to be able to be, a daughter to parents who had a sick child, or to be able to be a wife to a husband who had a sick wife, to be able to see my kids and to be a mother to kids who had a sick mother, they were still going through that in a real way, whether or not I was going through it really too, So being able to break out of, the world of mirrors that we sometimes form around ourselves, and to see beyond ourselves, is deeply, deeply spiritual. And I think that those connections, the deepening of all the connections in my life, were a massive gift of that experience. I never went to chemo alone. I had chemo buddies, as we called them. So we had a rotation of friends that would come with me. to chemo. And, you know, it was one of these experiences that, like, we are constantly running in life. We're running, so busy with everything. I really prioritized just sitting for hours and spending time with friends. It's one of the gifts from that moment in time that I really hope to carry with me forever. So a lot of that was deeply spiritual in nature. And I want to touch on one more thing before my time is up, which is in the world of psychology, there's an existential psychologist named Viktor Frankl. His therapy is called logotherapy. He developed it before the Holocaust, but he really deepened it while in his time in Auschwitz. And one of the things he talks about is and the therapy he wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. He talks about what he perceived as the most fundamental, most pivotal mindset that somebody had to have to really not just survive but thrive through whatever experiences they were going through. And to him, he realized that there was one way to go through life, which was that everything was happening randomly to someone and that it was meaningless in nature. And the people that he saw that thrived past everything, and really he saw the depths of it, right? He witnessed that the people who understood that there was meaning and there was purpose behind why, you know, they were experiencing whatever they were experiencing, they experienced life differently. And I think when we think through all the very, very complicated experiences we go through in life, not just the cancer, but whatever, you know, comes with it, as Ariel obviously points to so many of the factors that people will experience on a minute-to-minute basis with this particular hurdle in life. But every single one of them could feel, on the one hand, meaningless, or if infused with purpose and with meaning, it could literally propel us to a different place with our experiences. And I want to say that for sure, hands down, there's no question in my mind that had I felt that this whole journey was meaningless, I don't know that I would have made it out whole and healthy in mind through it all. And I think knowing that every step of the way was guided and purposeful, and it was guiding me towards a higher sense of self and a higher calling and a higher being, a higher ability to reach my ultimate purpose, to develop myself into somebody bigger and better than who I came into the journey with. I think all of that really carried me through it all. And I think at any point that you find yourself in it, to ask yourself, like, what could be the meaning behind this? What could be the purpose behind this all? How could I make sense of it all? What could make me better through this experience, and my family better, and my community better through this experience? It changes the entire dynamic. So I think that's a little bit about me. Robin, if you have any questions, I'm happy to Q&A with you too, or if anybody has any questions, I'm very happy to answer anything.
I just want to say thank you. And
You're welcome.
I'm so moved by your words, and I understand why I've been told by so many people that you're an outstanding and inspiring educator, because you really have given me cause to think about how to make meaning out of challenges, whether it's the one we're talking about tonight or any life challenge. So really thank you so much for your insights and inspiration, and for sharing and for inspiring this whole program this evening.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for doing this.
You're welcome. So I just want to say a few words before I open the session up to questions. We are small in numbers. We were not expecting hundreds of people to participate. This is a long-term project on the part of L'Chaim at the National Council of Jewish Women of Canada, Toronto section. What we are wanting to do is to slowly build a cohort of younger women who are facing cancer, and anybody who participates in this program, whether you yourself are impacted or a family member, through word of mouth, by posting this webinar on our website, by sharing it with our membership, by you sharing it with your friends. It's a way to help us build this program. We have great plans in mind should we get there. everything that we want to do will be informed by the needs of the group that we build. And so my request of everyone participating this evening is that if you could please keep in mind the expertise that was brought forward this evening, the role that our organization is playing in trying to support younger Jewish women with cancer, would be tremendously appreciated and helpful, because we have so much to offer and so much to share, as you can hear, but we need those participants, and it's not always that easy to find them. So we're hoping that through this two-part program, the people who participated in the first session as well as this one will be able to slowly build for the future. And so that's my request of all of you. But before we close, we have time for questions. Dr. Warner actually has texted me a question, which I'm going to ask on her behalf. And it is one that is being posed to Lauren. And the question is, would you be willing to share with us a little bit about the process of choosing a surrogate? Did you look independently or through an agency? Were there choices? And if so, what criteria did you and your husband use to choose?
Oh, thank you for the question. Yes, happy to share. So we actually had 2 gestational surrogates. The first surrogate that we had was here in Canada through a surrogacy agency. And the process was sending us different profiles of potential surrogates. And as she mentioned, were there any specifications to our surrogate? I think we were just open to anyone, to be honest. And that's not saying, obviously, that there's legitimacy for ages or for different religious backgrounds. But I think at this point, for Asaf and I, we were just happy to have a healthy woman that was willing to do this beautiful thing for us, hold our child for 9 months. And we did have a gestational surrogate here in Canada who unfortunately miscarried at 3.5 months. It was very sudden and out of the blue. The pregnancy had been very healthy up until that point. We were very devastated, and we decided not to continue on with her, not from a reflection of her on a one-to-one basis. She was lovely. I think it had been just a very difficult process around it all, and we might not have had the best experience specifically with the surrogacy agency. So we chose to actually go through Israel, who had an agency that worked very closely with a Georgian surrogacy agency and fertility clinic. And from that, we met our second gestational surrogate, who also, once again, I believe, so our first gestational surrogate was based here in Ontario, and she was 40. And our gestational surrogate who brought us along in Georgia was a Georgian woman. She lived a bit on the outskirts of Tbilisi. And I believe that she was 34, 35. I think there are a few rules around gestational surrogacy. One of them, I think the most important, is that the woman in question has had children before. So they've gone through the very emotional, large aspect of having a baby in your body and carrying them to terms. So we actually met our gestational surrogate. I didn't personally meet her because at the time there's a lot of logistics going on during the surrogacy, especially when it's abroad. And I was at home with the baby. He was only a few days old. So Asaf got to meet her in person, and they had a very emotional exchange. It was beautiful. She didn't speak English, but he speaks about it to this day. So we were very grateful and happy.
Thank
you so much for sharing that.
Are there any other questions? You don't have to put them in the chat. We're a small group. So is there anybody else in the program who has a question that they'd like to ask? If you do, you can come off of mute.
I have a question. I'm just wondering, is finding women who are willing to be surrogates, is that an issue here in Ontario, in Canada? I mean, Lauren, the fact that you went abroad, does that present difficulty in the process?
No, I believe that there are a lot of women. Also, by the way, I think I don't know how these women come to this stage in their life, and I'm so grateful they do, where they choose to be a gestational surrogate, because obviously before I was diagnosed with cancer and cervical cancer, I had no idea about gestational surrogacy. The only kind of idea that I had in my mind is people like the Kardashians who would have surrogates hold their babies because of vanity. And I think that this is a very bad trope, actually, that a lot of, there's a lot of public taboo in like society that surrogacy is just for the vain, and that there's a lot of misunderstanding as to the reasons women and couples go through this. There was actually a lot of choice. There were a lot of wonderful women that were willing to be surrogates. I think one of the decisions for us to go with an Israeli surrogacy agency was firstly because, as I mentioned briefly, and it's a big story, but we didn't feel comfortable anymore with our surrogacy agency. And I think part of that might have been from the trauma of having lost our baby. And also, I think at the time we felt maybe a bit more comfortable, and there's no rationale behind this, but maybe a bit more comfortable because I had gone through cancer in Israel and I'd gone through my operation there, my radical hysterectomy, and we'd had such an amazing, I mean, as amazing as it can be to go through that experience, but we had such a supportive system throughout all of it, from the moment I got diagnosed to being literally rushed through the system. Everyone was lovely, from the people taking my bloods to the people operating on me and taking care of me afterwards. So I think in that sense, we thought, well, why not try it? We had a lot of family and friends that knew of people that had gone through surrogacy through this Israeli agency. So that was our main decision, basically, leading to it. Not necessarily logical, but more emotionally based, I guess.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? If there are not, I'd like to call upon our president, Sheila Neuberger, to close our program this evening.
Thank you, Robin. I am going to what they call change hats for now, and take a moment to thank my co-presenters, Lauren, Ariel, and Liat, for your presentations, for your deeply personal presentations. It takes some courage to come on video, whether there's 5 people or 100 people, and sort of tell your story. And you all did it in the most sincere way possible, and shared information as well as your hearts with us tonight. So on behalf of the Board of National Council of Jewish Women, I'd like to thank you. And as Robin indicated, we do hope that this will grow and be of service to women in the future. It will be a slow growth, but we're going to keep at it. And I totally appreciated Lauren's feedback that this is something useful and meaningful that we should put some energy into. So thanks to everyone who attended tonight. And finally, thanks to our sponsors for the 2 sessions at the trio. They were great sponsors and we very much appreciated it. So thanks to everybody and good night.